All right, game of the week, not only in the SEC, in the country, in my opinion, Billy. Texas A&M hosts LSU here for, I've been calling it a playoff eliminator. It's probably not that, but I would certainly say the winner of this game, I feel very confident, is going to the college football playoff. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that would be, I've been sitting there crunching through my head like, what if they beat LSU? It's almost like you try to figure out how they wouldn't make the playoff after that, like if they lost one, right? Obviously, if either team wins this game and wins out, they're in, they're playing for the SEC title. But you're in your head going, okay, if A&M beats LSU and loses one the rest of the way, how do they not get in? Because there's a couple of scenarios there, but the odds and all the number of scenarios for them getting in far outweigh not getting in, right? Like if they went 2-1 in those final three, which for the Aggies would be South Carolina on the road, Auburn on the road, and Texas at home. So not an easy path at all, obviously, for A&M, and not one for LSU either. So, but yeah, I mean, the team that wins this game is in a great spot for the playoff, and maybe even a better spot for Atlanta, at which point they kind of can control their own destiny, whether they get in or not. So is it an eliminator? Like you said, no, but whichever team loses this one, 1,000% would have to win out the rest of their games to get in, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And I had our guy T-Bob on the show this week to talk from the LSU side. He said he spoke with you, and I want to make sure I quote this right, but he said that you told him this is perhaps the biggest game Texas A&M has had since coming to the SEC. Is that accurate?
I think without question. I think if you think about it, the only 2 years that it was really, where A&M was playing for something bigger was in 2012 and 2020. 2020, A&M lost their second game of the year to Bama. And they didn't, and then they won their third game, which was against number 3 Florida here at Kyle Field. After that, there wasn't. I'm trying to think if A&M played a ranked team the rest of the way until that bowl game. So it wasn't. And I said at Kyle Field too. And I think also in the SEC, Mike, because when they beat Bama in 2012 with Johnny, they already had 2 SEC losses. They were essentially out of the race unless Bama got upset, which wasn't happening back then, right? It wasn't going to happen twice in a year. And that was in November. If you're talking about home games, you'll remember this one. Undefeated A&M versus undefeated Tennessee, college game day. Butch Jones, Kevin Sumlin, Trevor Knight, Josh Dobbs, Travion Williams, Alvin Kamara. But that was like a double overtime game that the Aggies won to go like maybe 6-0. But the problem was Alabama loomed. Tennessee wasn't going to get past Bama and win the SEC. A&M wasn't. This is different. This is deeper into the season. The winner of this game, like you said, has the whole world open up for them. Texas A&M, even in those 2 great years, has never been in that position in a monster game. So, yeah, the 2020 season, they were in contention for the playoff. But like I said, they didn't have a showdown game down the stretch run. This is a showdown game. It's the biggest game A&M and LSU have ever played, certainly since joining the SEC, but I think ever. And there is a lot, what a lot of fans around the SEC don't realize, because it was before A&M was in the league, the Aggies and LSU used to play a lot prior when A&M was in the Southwest Conference. They'd play every year for a few years there. Those were in the down years for LSU. The Tigers canceled that deal and never paid their, the fee to cancel the contract. They never paid the fee to break the contract. But anywho, both these teams have everything on the line this weekend, and it's awesome. I mean, I just feel like it's going to be the most SEC of SEC football games that have been played here.
Couldn't have LSU robbed a children's hospital to pay that bill? I mean, you would think they would, but
I think they figured that out after the fact.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you went there because obviously Texas, that is goes without saying. That's the rivalry. But aside from Texas, is LSU the biggest rival you think to A&M in the conference?
It's interesting because they tried to force that, right? Like they moved Arkansas off of that weekend for LSU. They replaced Texas with LSU Thanksgiving weekend on A&M's schedule. I'm not even positive if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the first time it was on Thanksgiving. Now, I'm not sure, but they did all that, and it's a natural rivalry being next door, and so many LSU fans in the city of Houston, especially, but also throughout the state. So many Aggies in Louisiana. But it's not. It's so weird to say it's not. It just never naturally took as a rival. And look, a ton of that has to do with the LSU Alabama thing, but it just never really took. And I know I've got so many friends at LSU. They would not call A&M a rival. Same with Aggies and LSU. But there's quite a bit of animosity and like, I wouldn't call it hatred, but a lot of like, I do not want to lose to them. There's a lot of that in this thing. But on the field, Mike, this has been a damn rivalry. The last 6 years, prior to that, you had A&M, hiring John Chavis, LSU hiring Scott Woodward away. You had A&M hiring, I think, a couple other LSU assistants. You had Jimbo Fisher coming to A&M and coaching against LSU when all those years they wanted and assumed they were getting Jimbo. There's a lot of that stuff going on. You got Max Johnson coming over here and then going and playing against LSU. You have all this crazy stuff going on. And then on the field, the problem is, and what reason I don't think it took, LSU flat out dominated this series the first 6 years. They were 6-0. They'd won a Cotton Bowl 2 years earlier. They were 7-0. So how is that a rivalry? Well, the last 6 years, the home teams won. LSU walked him off with Edo, as he's going into the sunset. A&M's beaten 2 top 10 ranked LSU teams here, including Brian Kelly's first team, including, Joe Burrow's first year as a starter, 7 overtimes. You've got everything the last 6 years, but nothing like this. Nothing like what we're going to see across the street tomorrow night.
What's the backstory with the black uniforms? Because I think they look great, but I'm sure there's traditionalists that don't like them, and there's like Danny White at Tennessee, the AD. He refuses to have any kind of unique uniforms for any big game. He says the big game only it's got to be orange and white. What's your thoughts on this massive game wearing these black uniforms?
I get what Danny White's saying. I respect that. I like that. I like that line of thinking. And I know there are other schools. I know Chris Del Conte at Texas always says they're burnt orange and white, and I respect that. I like that. I also like changing it up. And it's just a thing where they've been planning this before the magnitude of this game, right? Like this is something that I'd heard about. They kind of leaked a little bit in the summer just to kind of tease that something like this might be coming. Just very subtle, which was, great use of social media, which Mike Elko really, I think, gets that space and understands it. It's exciting to see them finally have such a really good team in that regard too. But that I knew, so if I knew it was even planned before that, I would say I knew in the summertime it was going to be the LSU game. So that was just just so happens that this game has reached this magnitude. And I like it. Look, I love the maroon and white. I don't think there was a time there where A&M got a little cute and tricky with it. Everyone was trying to do that. Leave that for the Oklahoma States and the Oregons of the world, in my opinion. But like if Notre Dame can do an alternate uniform, Texas A&M can as well. If Ohio State can do one, Michigan, Texas A&M can too. So I like it. And if you're going to do it right. And like you said, those uniforms look really, it's going to be really nice. And I love, look, technically LSU's doing an alternate too. Now they're in their colors, but like they wore against Arkansas, when they go with that all white, that's not normally what you're going to see when you're at Kyle Field and the Bayou Bengals come running out. So I love it. You're going to have like the all white versus the all black. T-Bob said it today. It's got like a Star Wars feel to it. The stormtroopers and well, I guess not. I mean, I guess the stormtroopers are with Darth Vader, but Far be it from me to question T-Bob's Star Wars knowledge. I guess he meant white, like Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are the good guys versus the bad guys. I personally think LSU are the bad guys, don't we? Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree, but I would also agree Star Wars never far from T-Bob's mind. So
No,
if
no.
he can mix it in any shape or form, he's going to do it.
Star Wars and sex based on. I'm just like,
fair or not, Billy. If A&M loses this game, the narrative is going to be that they were not ready for the moment. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
no, I think that would just be depending on how the game went. You know, like, I mean, if these two teams played a 28-27, 31-28 last possession, four-quarter SEC fight, I don't think it would mean either team wasn't ready for the moment. But it is a moment, though, Mike, that A&M really should capitalize on. I had somebody I talked to this week say, is it fair to say A&M never wins a game like this? And my answer was no, because, or my answer is actually yes and no. The no part is this myth, this narrative that A&M doesn't win big games is completely false. And I would put A&M's big game, like if you're hanging skins on the wall since they joined the league 12 years ago, I mean, you'd probably go, obviously, Bama and Georgia. And I'm just telling you, I would like to see like the number of top 10 and number of top 5 wins and see where A&M would stack up in the last 12 years. I mean, just since Jimbo's arrived here at Kyle Field, A&M's beaten number 1 Bama, number 3 Florida, 2 top 10 LSU teams, a top 10 Missouri team a couple weeks ago. I know they knocked off like number 11 Auburn, number 12 Kentucky. They've got skins on the wall just at this stadium alone, you know, since Fisher arrived 6 years ago. Sumlin won a few of those as well. So I don't think that's a fair narrative that they don't win big games. But if you want to narrow it down and say this, when they rise up to this point and get this true breakthrough opportunity, because like beating Alabama, and I'll be the first to say I got ahead of myself after that one. Beating Alabama a couple of years ago, it was a breakthrough moment, but it wasn't like indicative of the team turning the corner and kind of telling the world we're here. Like that game, they had lost 2 in a row. They were 0-2 in the SEC when they won that game. So what did it really mean? Well, it meant they beat Alabama during an 8-4 season. When we're this deep in the season and you've got A&M Texas looming on the horizon and what that could mean if there are postseason implications, this is one of those opportunities to like truly break through on a different level. So, yeah, I think if you said they don't typically win this kind of game, I'd go, yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, them beating North Carolina and winning a New Year's Six Bowl, beating Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, you know, under Bob Stoops and with Johnny validating that Heisman and A&M's first year outside the Big 12. Like, these are moments. And you have to go all the way back to like the 98 Big 12 title game. So, yeah, they haven't broken through in a lot of these moments. And this is an opportunity they've got to really, I think, like you said earlier, whether it's A&M or LSU, force yourself into the real conversation of a playoff berth. But, man, just as important for this program, you'd be in the SEC title conversation in November for the first time, really, since you joined. I mean, those other 2 years, yeah, sure, if Bama went out and just randomly lost a game or two, but that's not real. This would be real if you got in there, came out of this weekend on Sunday, and you're looking at A&M as probably a top 10 team and a team that's 5-0 in the SEC.
Mm-hmm. What's your expectations for Conner Weigman in this game? Because we've really only seen him in 3 meaningful games this season. Notre Dame, I thought he looked awful. Yeah. Missouri, I thought he looked amazing. Yeah. And then last week, Mississippi State, kind of middle, kind of average. So what's your expectations for Weigman in this huge game?
I'm biased because I know the kid, and I know I've known him since he was known what he is as a player and a competitor since he was in high school. Actually, one of the guys that works here at TexAgs and covers recruiting and baseball for me. He was his baseball coach when he was a little kid. So we're real familiar with Conner here. And man, I'd be surprised if he doesn't come out and play really well tomorrow night. And T-Bob was actually surprised when I mentioned, he's 1-0 against LSU. People forget that because A-Chain ran for 230 yards. Conner had a great game that night, and he threw up a couple balls, one of the prettiest throws you'll ever see to Moose Muhammad for a touchdown, and he threw up another deep ball that Moose went and outfought LSU defenders for. But even if you go back and watch early in that game, Conner was dialed in. He's outrunning Perkins to the sticks to extend scoring drives. He's on the money with his throws. For Weigman, so much of this, Mike, is going to be how he's got to be on time and in rhythm. And you watch him against Missouri, and that's what you saw. You watch him against Notre Dame, you did not see that at all. You watched him in that LSU game that I talked about, or against Ole Miss, or when he can do that, man, it is tough to defend because he's quick release, he's deadly accurate with the football, and he can run. And if you go back and look, even against Mississippi State, now he could have had a disastrous game in that one. They dropped a pick six and he threw two, but he also made some plays that a lot of quarterbacks can't make in that football game. And then he also made, as you watch him, like these terrific, like NFL level timing throws. So yeah, if we're talking about an A&M win next week, and we're talking about the Aggies beating LSU, I think it doesn't have to involve Conner throwing for more yards than Nussmeier, but it has to involve Conner Weigman playing a really good football game, and it's got to involve the A&M defensive line controlling this game, particularly in the run game. So big day by Conner Weigman and them containing Caden Durham. That's the formula for an A&M victory, in my opinion.
Well, Billy, I know we both had a big smile on our face last weekend as Texas got humbled. They were telling me they own the conference, they own the country, totally got outclassed. They embarrassed themselves. What was more shocking? The behavior of the fans?
Hey, Mike. Mike.
Was it the
I don't have any more to throw, but
was it the behavior of the fans? Was it this elite offensive line that I heard's got 20 NFL players on it? They just got humiliated, or was it Sarkisian who said, "By God, Quinn's our man, and I'll never look past him." He benched his ass. I mean, what? There's so many narratives coming out of that game, but what stood out to you the most?
Well, I'm going to be a little more careful here because they've clipped like things I've said to you in the past, and I had a humbling experience last Friday on a podcast where our friend Amanda Atwell took about 400 comments I've made in the past, all basically about Texas and the SEC and Sark, but I can't help myself, right? I can't, and you know this, so here it goes. I'm sorry, I can't. I think the biggest reason, the throwing stuff on the field was embarrassing. Anyone that tries to say otherwise, and look, other fan bases have done it. That's not exclusive to Texas. Some would say that proved they're SEC ready. I think the biggest embarrassment in that game was how the officials reacted to it. I actually thought Sark handled it well. It was just their fans were ridiculous down there. It was embarrassing. But to me, the bigger issue here was it's really more about Georgia, right? And what they said. Like, they heard it a lot more than you and I did. They heard it a lot more than what people on Twitter did. They heard everything. And I thought Kirby said it best was when he said our intent was not to take pictures. And that was a direct shot at the whole. By the way, of course, there's a lot of celebrities there. It's F1 weekend in Austin. Like, what? So, but yeah, not to take pictures, but we came here to eat. And eat they did. And to me, like, it's not about Texas losing to Georgia. There's no shame in that. And being in the SEC, and that's what we've tried to tell them, right? Like, this is rough every week. And they're probably go beat Vandy this weekend, but they're without now Bond is out and they're coming off a physical loss and it can't have been a fun week. Like, this is where it gets tough, right? Is these type situations. All we try to do was speak reality. And sometimes we're wrong and sometimes we're right, but they were the ones that did so much chirping the whole offseason with each of these wins this year, beating a bad Michigan team, dogpiling me for saying Michigan sucked. They're going to lose. I said they're going to lose 5. They might lose 6. Dogpiling you for saying something. Oklahoma stinks. But with each win, they got more and more braggadocious, more and more arrogant. And so I personally don't think there's any shame in losing to Georgia. And I think Texas still controls their own destiny to play in the SEC title game. And if we're being dead ass serious, they've got a great look at doing it. And the one thing that might stand between them and that happening is right here across the street in maroon and white. So, I mean, Texas is in a fine spot if they can handle that loss. They play what? Vandy, Arkansas, Florida, like Kentucky. They should be fine. There's no guarantees in this league, and I think that's what they're going to find out. But just for all the talking and all the grief everybody else caught, and I'm joking about me and you, and a lot of what I do with those Longhorns is just fun banter, and it's like I win some, I lose some, but they were chirpy to not only me, not only you, not only the A&M fan base, or the whole conference and the whole country. And too many people that cover this thing fell for it. And you and I did too, by the way, because we both picked Texas to win by more than a score. I think you said 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
but I think that's why this is such something of like people seem to be taking like a victory lap. It's not because there's embarrassment in losing to the freaking Georgia Bulldogs who beat everybody over the last 5 years except Bama somehow. It's just about how much you yapped and talked everything up. Texas is really good. They're right now, they certainly still look like a top 5 team. I think the biggest story, though, is the officiating getting bullied out of a call. That was the most disgraceful thing I've seen from SEC officials yet. And then the second thing that's the storyline is I do think you need to look into Texas with a little bit more of a critical eye now and say, there's a little more critical of a lens to say, look, OU's really bad, okay? Michigan is not any good. Georgia's the real team you've played. That's it. And you were down 23-0 to them on your home field. You lost by 15 points on your home field, and you were really dominated on both lines of scrimmage. Well, I wouldn't say both. I thought the Texas D-line held up. You were dominated physically by that Georgia team, and I know it's Georgia, but if you look at the rest of Georgia's body of work, it's not like the last 4 years or so. So if we're really evaluating Texas fairly right now, I'm going to say I look at their schedule and I think they can navigate that and come in here at 10-1. I do. But if you're really looking, you go, are they as good as everyone was telling us they were, including everyone in Austin, but not just them, the media around the country as well. I think everyone put the cart ahead of the horse, and Texas still has work to do. I think they're really good. I don't think they're unbeatable elite. Georgia proved that. But I think with the way they did it and what Georgia's done all year, barely beating Kentucky, close game against Auburn at halftime, being down 28-0 to a Bama team that has since looked very shaky, I do think you have to look at them and go, man, they just went in there and just absolutely clubbed them.
Yeah, yeah. And so last thing for you, Billy, because I'm glad you said all that. Let's say Texas wins out heading into the A&M game. So they're 10-1, and Texas loses to A&M. They likely won't have a top 25 win. So they'll be sitting here at 10-2. Will they get in the playoff, and do they deserve to get in the playoff if they have 0 top 25 wins?
Yes, they will. And that's what the SEC, I think, is starting to see that this weekend. know they won't deserve it. Well, I say that, okay, we got to see what happens with college football. But just like a 10-2 A&M team, if they didn't make, I think a 10-2 A&M team that didn't make it into the SEC title game would probably get in, because you'd either have a win over LSU or Texas. If A&M went 10-2 and beat Texas, they're probably in the SEC title game. I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, that would be tough to imagine them out of that field. I guess Georgia and LSU could each have one loss, but I think but if A&M were to lose to Texas, be sitting at 10-2, I think that would mean they'd have a nice win over LSU. They'd have a win over Missouri. Their two losses would be to Texas and to Notre Dame. So I think they'd be all right. But yeah, Texas at 10-2, losing to A&M, not playing in the SEC championship game, that would depend a lot on what's going on in these other conferences. But yeah, I would assume that they get in because, look, they're box office, and they're one of those. They are, no matter what we say, they're certainly one of those brands. You know, when A&M was in contention for the college football playoff in 2020, and the two teams they were having to pass one out of essentially Ohio State and Notre Dame, deep down, if you really were honest with yourself, you knew that probably wasn't going to happen. So imagine on the back end of a 12-team playoff, if they're arguing a 10-win Texas team out of the SEC versus somebody's gonna pay for that one and miss out. So yeah, I think they would still get in, and hopefully that's something we're discussing, because if we are, it would probably mean A&M's playing for an SEC title for their first time. And look, you know as well as I do, we still live in a world where it could be those two teams playing. Although I have a hard time not seeing Georgia. I think they basically nailed down. I don't think they're going to lose. Maybe in Oxford in a low-scoring defensive game. Maybe. I don't fully trust Carson Beck yet. I just don't. So yeah, I mean, I guess they could go into Oxford and lose, 24-23 or something. That's certainly possible. I just don't think it will. I think Georgia's just going to go up from here, and they'll be in Atlanta again. And then I think the winner of this game will join Texas as the two favorites to claim that other spot.
All right, Billy, thank you so much for your time. Before you go, tell my audience, especially these angry Longhorn fans, how to give you a follow and how to check out all the fine work over at TexAgs.
They know how. I was with a lot of my Alabama and Tennessee people this weekend after the game. I was in your neck of the woods. I went to Post Malone, and so the other SEC fans that are listening, because I know they love you, it's at Billy Liucci, BILLYLIUCCI, and then you can go to TexAgs.com, and that TexAgs is us on all social media platforms, just at TexAgs.
All right, thank you, my man. I really appreciate it, Billy. Hit me up anytime, brother.
All right, brother. Good talking to you, Mike.